Lydia, an urbanite journalist, was always surrounded by the cacophony of city life, car horns, distant chatter, and the constant hum of activity. Desperate for a change, she decided it was time for a sabbatical, a month-long escape to rediscover her creativity. Her search led her to Airbnb, where a quaint, picturesque cottage in a remote village beckoned her. The listing was detailed. Beautiful photographs displayed every corner of the cottage. Old-world charm permeated through shots of rustic wooden doors, and ivy-covered walls suggested a history steeped in time. Antique furniture adorned the living spaces, complete with a roaring fireplace and hand-woven rugs. An inviting bedroom with billowing white curtains promised restful nights, while a sunlit kitchen hinted at mornings with warm tea and fresh bread. However, the highlight for Lydia was the garden, an oasis of calm with blossoming flowers and the gentle buzz of bees. In the comments, previous tenants repeatedly praised the refreshing quiet of the area, with some even saying it felt as if time stood still during their stay. The scarcity of reviews didn't bother Lydia. Perhaps this hidden gem was simply undiscovered. The journey to reach the cottage was no small feat. Lydia had to transition from busy highways to winding country roads, and finally to a narrow, gravelly path. When she finally approached the village, it felt like she had been transported back in time. Towering trees swayed in a gentle breeze, casting dappled shadows on the ground. The mountains in the distance stood tall, guarding the village like ancient sentinels. It was picturesque, almost too perfect. But as she drove through the village, she felt a palpable sense of stillness. The houses, many of which seemed just as old as her Airbnb, were eerily silent. No children played in the yards, no elderly sat on porches, no laundry fluttered in the breeze. Lydia tried to shake off the eerie feeling, rationalizing that maybe she had arrived during a village siesta or a local holiday. She reached the cottage. The front door was slightly ajar. Cautiously, Lydia pushed it open. Inside, it was just as the photographs had shown, beautiful, pristine, and untouched. Yet the silence of the village seemed amplified within these walls. After unpacking and trying to settle in, Lydia decided to make some tea in the well-equipped kitchen. As she waited for the water to boil, she tried to distract herself from the unsettling quiet by browsing through a guest book left on the counter. Previous guests had scribbled notes about their stay, and one recurring comment stood out: "The nights are even quieter." Darkness crept in quickly, and Lydia tried to lose herself in a book. However, every creak of the wooden floors, every gust of wind against the windows felt unnaturally loud. When she finally decided to head to bed, the stillness weighed heavily around her. Sometime deep into the night, Lydia awoke to a noise. At first she thought it might be her imagination, but then she heard it again, soft shuffling footsteps. Heart pounding, she tiptoed to her door. The moonlight filtering through the curtains revealed a shocking sight in the living room. An old man sitting in the armchair, staring into space. She stifled a gasp. Thoughts raced through her mind. Should she confront him? Escape? In her paralysis of fear, she continued to watch. The minutes felt like hours until she noticed something even more chilling. The man's chest wasn't moving, he wasn't breathing. Mustering courage, Lydia stepped closer. The man seemed lost in thought, unaware of his surroundings. On the table next to him lay an old photograph of a young woman who eerily resembled Lydia. Her heart raced as she tried to piece together the puzzle. Just then the man whispered, "Is it really you?" Lydia, taken aback, replied hesitantly, "I think you have mistaken me for someone else." The man, tears forming in his eyes, murmured about waiting years for his daughter to return. Just as suddenly as he appeared, the man seemed to vanish. The chair was empty. Everything felt surreal. Lydia spent a sleepless night. The next morning, Lydia checked out of the cottage. She learned from a local that the man she had met was the previous owner, whose daughter had vanished decades ago and never returned. The Airbnb hosts had bought the property after his passing. Shaken, Lydia realized she had come face to face with a father's undying hope and a village's haunting past. Jonathan and Clara, a couple in desperate need of a break from their bustling city life, finally found an Airbnb listing that seemed too good to be true. The photos showcased a modern beach house with panoramic views of the azure ocean, nestled at the edge of a secluded beach. The reviews were full of praise for the incomparable serenity of the location. Eagerly, they booked their stay. As their car meandered through serpentine roads, surrounded by dense forests, they felt both excitement and trepidation. Hours away from the nearest town, the isolation of the beach house was becoming palpable. they came to a rusty sign that read, "Private property, keep out." Below it was an arrow pointing down a narrow path leading to their destination. The first sight of the house was mesmerizing. Its modern design with tall glass windows and sleek wooden panels harmonized beautifully with the unending expanse of the azure ocean beyond. But there was an unexpected detail. The front door was not just unlocked but slightly open. Jonathan mused aloud that perhaps the wind might have pushed it open, or maybe the cleaner had forgotten to shut it properly. Clara's fingers tightened around her bag, a hint of unease in her eyes, but she said nothing. Upon entering, they were greeted by a cool breeze wafting in from the open back doors, leading to a patio. The interiors were just as the photos had portrayed, minimalistic, elegant, and pristine. Yet the very openness of the house made the outside feel ever-present. The sound of the crashing waves, although soothing, was a stark reminder of their isolation. The evening was a blur of enjoyment, a beautiful sunset, wine, and the sounds of the ocean. But as night enveloped the beach house, the once soothing sounds became ominously loud. The lack of nearby lights meant darkness was profound. The only light came from the occasional gleam of the moon on the water. Trying to shake off their unease, the couple decided to watch a movie. Halfway through, a sudden power outage plunged them into darkness. As Jonathan fumbled for his phone's flashlight, Clara felt an icy draft. One of the sliding doors was wide open. The couple methodically searched the house, ensuring all doors and windows were securely locked. The wind outside had picked up, sending an eerie whistle through any gaps or crevices. The house seemed to echo back, a cacophony of creaks and groans. But just as they began to chalk up their fears to an overactive imagination, Clara's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from the Airbnb host. "I trust you're settling in well. It's crucial, especially at night, to make sure all doors and windows are locked. The area has been known for some peculiar incidents involving uninvited guests." The ambiguity of the message did little to ease their worries. Jonathan suggested maybe it was wildlife the host was referring to, but Clara wasn't convinced. They decided to stay together in the living room, with the lights on and curtains drawn, waiting for the security of daylight. The wind's howling seemed to carry whispers, making the couple increasingly on edge. Jonathan tried to keep the mood light, suggesting they watch a movie to distract themselves. Just as they were settling down, Clara heard a faint, deliberate scratching sound coming from the patio door. Frozen in place, she gestured for Jonathan to hear. The soft, rhythmic sound sent shivers down their spines. Cautiously, Clara approached the window to peek out. To her horror, she saw a man, his face obscured by the shadows, standing right outside their door. His gaze was fixed intently on their house. Alarmed, Clara whispered to Jonathan, describing what she had seen. Moving quietly, Jonathan grabbed a kitchen knife, positioning himself by the door. They dialed the local police, but the response time was going to be at least 30 minutes due to their remote location. For what felt like hours, they sat in silence, listening intently. The scratching stopped, but every so often they would hear soft footsteps circling the house. Finally, as dawn's first light began to break, the sounds outside ceased. Once the sunlight was bright enough, they cautiously ventured out. They were met with a disturbing sight. Everywhere around the house, symbols had been drawn in the sand, some almost ritualistic in nature. Packing up quickly, they decided to leave. Stopping for gas on their way back, they overheard locals discussing a man, recently released from a nearby institution, who had been wandering the area. Some claimed he was searching for a house he once lived in. Some even suggested he was trying to recreate moments from his past, looking for people to share them with. The couple shuddered, realizing how close they had come to a very real danger. Nestled amidst towering trees and sprawling grounds, the Old Manor promised a retreat from the frenetic pace of city life. Melanie and James, a young couple in dire need of a getaway, were enticed by its Gothic architecture and vast gardens, showcased in captivating Airbnb photos. The price seemed too good to be true, especially with the caveat. Guests were strictly forbidden from entering the east wing of the manor. Upon arrival in the late afternoon, the sun's golden hues gave the manor's stone facade an almost ethereal glow. Their host, Jeffrey, a middle-aged man with stern features, emphasized the rules of the house, especially the one about the east wing. As they traversed the sprawling interior, they were taken aback by the luxurious decor, maze-like corridors, and grand staircases. However, the eerie quiet was undeniable. It wasn't just the absence of noise, but a weighty silence, like a heavy blanket muffling everything. The nearest town's distance only intensified their feeling of seclusion. Dinner was a splendid affair. The Old Manor's dining room was adorned with candlelit chandeliers, and they dined to the soft sounds of a vintage radio playing classical music. The ambiance was perfect, yet the looming presence of the East Wing cast a shadow over the evening. While Melanie found solace in a book, James tried to lighten the mood by tuning the radio to a comedy show. But the comforting sounds of laughter and applause did little to quell their unease, especially when intermittent whispers began to intertwine with the broadcast. James, ever the skeptic, reasoned it could be interference or just the wind playing tricks. But when both heard soft footsteps, the allure of the forbidden East Wing became impossible to resist. The next day, a leisurely stroll through the gardens led them to an overgrown path towards the East Wing. A cracked window revealed a glimpse of a time-capsuled child's room, toys from a bygone era strewn about, adding to the mansion's mysteries. As dusk approached, the whispers evolved into soft murmurs, like conversations just out of earshot. Melanie felt an inexplicable pull towards them while James grew increasingly agitated. Midnight silence was shattered by a heart-stopping scream emanating from the East Wing, compelling them to investigate. The door, previously locked, now stood slightly ajar, revealing cold, dimly lit corridors. Melanie gingerly opened the diary, her fingers brushing against pages filled with childlike handwriting. It spoke of Samuel's isolation, his yearning for the outside world, and his heartache, being able to see the manor's gardens but never touch them. As she read, an overwhelming sense of sorrow consumed her. James, uneasy with their trespassing, suggested they return to their room. Just as they were about to exit, a soft hum of a lullaby drifted through the corridor. Following its melody, they stumbled upon a decrepit playroom. Old toys, worn and faded with age, lay scattered across the floor, and the lullaby's source was an old gramophone, eerily playing on its own. From the shadows, a light flickered. An old film projector had sprung to life, displaying fragmented moments of Samuel's life. The innocent laughter, the lonely birthdays, and the countless days peering out of the window. A gust of wind blew from the end of the corridor, and a succession of locked doors began to rattle. One by one, they started to swing open, revealing empty rooms. But the last door remained still. The unnerving silence was then punctuated by a soft whimper. A sound of distress. Compelled by an unexplainable urge, Melanie approached, while James, apprehensive, urged caution. The door creaked open to reveal a room filled with medical equipment, bearing evidence of a hasty departure. A single bed stood in the center, surrounded by faded drawings and letters addressed to Daddy. The reality hit them hard. Samuel had not only been quarantined but left to his own devices, longing for his father's affection. The weight of sadness was palpable. Suddenly the house lights dimmed, plunging the corridor into darkness. Heavy footsteps echoed, growing louder with each passing second. They could discern a muffled conversation, where Jeffrey's voice oscillated between anger and desperation. Spotting a window at the corridor's end, James forced it open, urging Melanie to climb out. As they descended into the garden, the manor's lights flickered back to life, revealing Jeffrey's distraught face at the window, a picture of torment. As they reached their car, they glanced back one last time. Jeffrey stood at the manor's entrance, not pursuing them but watching, his silhouette forlorn against the backdrop of the grandiose house. The drive back was silent, their minds processing the harrowing experience. They would later discover from a local tavern that after Samuel's passing, Jeffrey, unable to cope with the grief, shunned the outside world, replaying the last moments with his son over and over in the confines of the East Wing. The Old Manor, with its stunning architecture and tragic past, became a testament to the fragility of the human psyche. The tale of a father's love, loss, and the overwhelming guilt that can drive a man into the shadows of his own mind. In the shadows of the night, if our tales from Unsettling horror stories gave you a fright, press like and let it be known. Subscribe, so you're never alone in this haunting journey, and share, so others too can be wary. Until our next sinister tale, stay dark, dear listener.